Hi, I just want to make sure that everybody has open a copy of the team challenge and a copy of the team manager workbook. Those should have been sent to you earlier today. If you don't have those, I'm just going to screen share some short links that you can click on that will take you to them. Okay, can we see those? Can we see these links?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Good. Wonderful. Okay, and then we will take it away. Yeah? Do we have everybody that registered on yet, Kate?
Yeah, for the most part, yes.
Okay, great. Well, then we'll just start to respect everybody's time. Hi, I'm Kayla. I'm one of the technical ACMs.
I'm David Jarrett, technical ACM for this year.
And then over here.
Hi, I'm Megan O'Brien. I'm one of the brand new technical ACMs for this year.
And then, oh, am I supposed to?
Over here.
And then,
It's me, Justin. I'll be watching for your guys' questions in the questions pane and popping in to talk every once in a while.
All right, so we are going to
making sure they're doing a good job.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the challenge itself. So if you have a copy of the challenge open, go ahead and scroll down or open up to page 5, where we're going to talk about the payload and drop zone, or the payload, drop zone, and the landing stuff. This is, yeah.
The process of the challenge this year for the technical challenge is to create a aircraft that can be launched, and you can. This is a diagram of the layout of the site, and you can see it's going to be about the entire thing is about 20 feet by 20 feet here. And so the idea is you create an aircraft that can be launched and then drop a payload and then land in the area. So there's 5 different launch areas, A, B, C, and D. So there's 5 different launch attempts for the aircraft. So the idea is that the aircraft gets launched. As it flies across, it'll drop a payload, and you can see in the center portion of the area where there's these different areas for different point values for if the payload lands in those locations, and then there's a landing line where the aircraft is expected to land, and that's really the essence of this challenge, is to create an aircraft that drops, and then the challenges you'll see is it's going to be measuring the accuracy of the dropping of the payloads.
So our next part here is to talk a little bit about the story.
So Megan has this.
Okay, that's Megan.
We can't hear you, Megan.
Hello. Okay, so you guys are all looking at the scoring page right now. You can see the 2 major point areas for this challenge are the aircraft and the payload drops. You probably want to have this score sheet available to look at with your team at every one of your rehearsals, so you can go over where the different points are allocated for this challenge. So probably an important part that you want to go over is the difference between technical design and technical innovation, because those are worth 40 points each. Those are both distinct elements that you want to make sure to go over with your team. And then, as you can see, story is worth a large chunk as well. And then we have the team choice elements. And so all together, you can see the different percentages that these points are worth all together for this challenge.
One of the things that we encourage for team managers is to actually have a copy of the scoring sheet at every single one of your team meetings, and then use this to have your team members actually score themselves. And so as they go through and develop the challenge, make sure that they're actually scoring it, and then also make sure that they're hitting every single element on the score sheet. And so if the team member comes up and goes, I don't know what to do next, you can always refer them back to the score sheet and find out where what are elements that they're not they haven't done, or areas that they might be able to improve on. So we highly encourage people to take it and follow, use the score sheet throughout their team meetings.
Okay, so that's all we really wanted to say about the challenge out front. So we're gonna talk a little bit about this team manager workbook we created and how that can help you in solving the challenge and help your teams figure out the challenge. So if there are any questions so far on the scoring elements right now or on actual layout of the challenge, now would be a great time to type those into your question and answer section. And then we're gonna switch over to our team manager workbook. You should also have a copy of this open.
So one of the things that we put together for the challenge this year is this workbook. And so this is sort of new for this year. And this is to give you some activities to do during your team meetings to help run the meetings and help your teacher teams about the challenge. And so one of the things here to keep in mind is that as a team manager, you can teach, guide, and mentor, and your team members can do, create, and interpret. So this is very important because we just want to make sure that that when you're going through these activities, that you're really, it's all about the teaching and guiding and mentoring portion. So that's incredibly important to emphasize here and what we're trying to do with this. So we have several activities, and we're going to walk through the different activities for teaching the challenge to your team members. So first up is going to be Justin, who's going to be talking about activity number 1, which is how to teach technical design and innovation. Over here. Yeah.
So with technical design and technical innovation, they kind of sound the same, but they are scoring 2 different elements. So technical innovation is all about ideas, while technical design is all about implementation. So if we think about like cars, for example, the original car was super innovative because the idea nobody had ever thought of doing a car before. And so that's would score relatively high for innovation in that sense. However, its design might not be as good as the design of a modern day supercar or a Tesla, who is super, like, all the details are kinked out, they don't break down at all, like that kind of a car that is like meant to run for 20 years. So with this activity, we're trying to get those ideas into the team members' heads and try to explain that difference. So the exercise that we'd like your teams to do would be to go out and find 3 things that fly, 3 things that drop, and 3 things that launch. And then we want them to start building their own scale of what good technical design and what good technical innovation are. So if every team member goes out and gets ideas for these things, or even bonus points if they actually bring a physical item in, then you guys can, as a team, decide, okay, this might be low technical design, but it might be high technical innovation. This might be high on both, that kind of a thing, and then putting them on this 0 to 30 scale that we've drawn at the bottom. And just to get yourselves in the mindset of what good technical innovation and good technical design are. And just lastly, like as David was saying earlier, the important thing is that the kids are doing these activities, because if we tell them that this is high technical innovation, that will influence them and that could be interference.
Justin, this is Kate. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, you have a question that came in, is what if the kids start to design and build an aircraft, fail towards the end and reach the end, like fail when they're getting too close to the deadline?
So one of the things that I always point out with the challenges is there are always very simple solutions to these challenges. So if those things start happening, you would actually start I would be asking my teams about how they can actually solve the problem very quickly. So one of the reasons for doing this exercise we have here is, you can see here, it's not that they're going to pick one design and try it out and think about it. We want them to sort of bring and have them evaluate and think about maybe 5, 6, or even 10 different designs, and then try to evaluate that. And they can divide, and so that they actually won't have that. They won't encounter those problems. And so doing this exercise early on, you can actually start discovering whether the problem is going to be too hard for them to actually do, or you can talk to them about whether it's possible, like whether they think they can get it done, and in the time periods and so forth. So one is use exercise to sort of vet a bunch of ideas so that you don't get into a dead end. And then two, if a dead end happens, which it does, is use that as a teaching moment to actually solve the challenge and with your team very quickly, because all of these challenges can be solved very quickly.
So our next question is, it seems like you just said you can't tell them which items are high design or high innovation.
Kayla, we can't hear you.
Unmute yourself and then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
Okay. Come over here.
So I just want everybody to know there's another question. It seems like you just said that we can't tell them which items are high design or innovation. Did I hear that right? Can we tell them, or do we need to allow the teams to decide which examples are high design and which examples are high innovation?
Part of this exercise is to get them to make that determination. So you don't have them do it. You can easily sort of start looking at and have them put together the scale. That's sort of what this is all about, is to put together that scale for them themselves. And it's about them figuring out what it's part about that your team can create, do, and this is the interpret portion. So, and part of the reason for having you bring in and have the team bring many objects that can fly and drop is to do that evaluation so that they can learn it amongst themselves. So you're not telling them what it is, they can learn it.
We can give them these definitions that we have here, that technical design is reliability of the design, and technical innovation is things like the idea and like being novel and new. There are definitions inside of the challenge. It's on page 6 has some really good definitions that get at the core of this. Yep. And by practicing with these ideas, the kids will start to build the scale and know what the difference between technical design and technical innovation is, and start to understand what good design and what good innovation is.
So one thing also, we mentioned this here in this activity, is that when the appraisers are appraising the technical innovation and design, they're really they're only scoring the stuff that actually the team built. So if the team goes off and buys a solution or buys something that will actually do like the aircraft, and they went off and bought it and they didn't modify it at all, that would actually we're only scoring the technical design and innovation of the things that actually the team modifies and actually the team built themselves. So that's a very key thing to talk to them about. Yeah.
So we had a question about suggestions if there's no 20 by 20 space to practice in. You could always practice outside. Maybe get you could grab some books off the shelf and use those to delineate the spaces. It might not be like perfectly sized. You could also go out and buy a tarp and actually tape this diagram on a tarp. That way you can fold it up and then take it outside and do the practicing there. I know obviously it isn't ideal with wind conditions because there won't be wind, hopefully, in whatever environments we're in. We can't guarantee that there won't be like a draft or something like that, but like we're going to do our best to minimize that kind of a.
Yeah, a couple other suggestions I would say, like if you don't, if you have the full 20 by 20, if you have a place where you can have just a strip that's 20 feet long, that might not be 20 by 20, but just a strip so you can actually fly the aircraft for testing it. That would be another alternative. So you're not testing it in the full in the full space, but you might be able to do a lot of the initial testing in a much smaller area. The other thing is to look for different space in terms of like your school, whether it's an auditorium or your classroom, to actually sort of do some of the practices here.
Okay.
I think too, by doing this exercise, you're also expanding your thought process of what an aircraft is, because when the kids are looking for things that fly, it may not be what you're thinking of in your head right now. They might come up with
That's
really
correct.
different things that fly.
Yep, yep. And part of this is, again, just like to get those as many ideas out as quickly and to evaluate them. So next up is activity number 2, which is going to be on the story, and Megan's going to be talking about that.
Wait, David, we have a question on the topic of the other topic. We are talking about moving 20 feet with a remote and drop where we want, or do they need to design it at around 12 feet?
So if you look at the diagram of where, let me go back to the layout. Is here. So the way this works is that we have these different launch zones, takeoff zones here, the A, B, and C. And the idea is that the aircraft needs to be airborne while it's in those launch zones, and then it needs to fly across. And then when it's flying across, it needs to drop the payload. And depending upon where the payload gets dropped here, you can see if it's down here in the center area, that's 10 points, and then 5, 3, 2, and 1. So the idea is that it's not dropping anywhere, it's actually trying to also create it where the payloads are being dropped very accurately.
Can a team assist or physically touch the air? Well, I don't see that. Physically assist or physically touch the aircraft when in flight in order to drop the payload?
So the answer is no. So while it's actually going in flight, there can be nothing. There can be no team member touching it or no guidance. There can be no guidance mechanism like a wire or something like this that would actually guide it. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. You can see here part of this is that the team members cannot be part of the aircraft as part of the last one, and then the definitions for what the takeoff are and flight and landing are. Yeah. It's like, yeah, in flight if touched by any person. You can't have people touching it or guiding it. Any other questions?
Can there be a vehicle on the ground under the craft if not touching the craft?
Like I said, there can be nothing that guides it from below. If it's not touching, then it's just fine.
I can't hear Kayla. I don't. For a team in zone B, the aircraft has to move straight, while for a team in E, it has to move at an angle. All teams move from all locations, right?
Yeah, so
Yes.
One of your takeoff spaces, can somebody scroll down to that part?
Yep.
One of your takeoff spaces will be A, so you're right, it'll be straight across, and then B will be straight across. And then when you get towards E, right, if you're going for those high points, then you are going to be like going at an angle to get from A to the landing zone through that place where you're going to get the most points. That doesn't mean that's what your team has to do, though. However your team chooses to solve it is up to them.
And the team can choose to go from these starting areas in any order that they want. So they can go A, B, C, D, E, go backwards, or go some random order depending on whatever they decide to do. And we've got another question as well.
How do we bring the aircraft back from the landing zone?
It can just be carried back.
It's up to the team. If the team wants to carry it back, fly it back, any other creative solutions they come up with, it's completely up to them.
That's specified.
Can team members be in the payload drop zone while the aircraft is in flight?
Yes, they can. They can be in the drop zone, and you can have, but you have to be careful that actually that the team member or nothing else touches the payload as it's dropping.
This talks on this connects to another question that was asked about guidance with the payload. The payload cannot be guided during the fall. as soon as it is touched by anything that is not the tournament provided for, before it stops moving, the points don't count. So if it hits the ground and starts rolling around and a team member picks it up before it's come to a halt, then that won't be scored for a successful payload drop. Or if there's like a giant funnel in the sky or something like that, that funnel cannot guide it to the location.
Right.
Are there?
So we didn't mention this, but there's the scoring is also done where if the payload touches, you get the highest points. And so if just a portion of the payload is touching, for instance, the 10 zone, you will get the 10 zone. It doesn't have to be completely within the 10.
Are there 5 flights, 1 from each letter, or 5 flights from each letter?
It's 1 flight from each letter. Yeah.
So if that was your payload that dropped and that big payload,
I can't hear Kayla.
Yeah.
so if that was your payload that dropped, you would get the section where it's covering the most points. So you would get 10 points because it hits the 10-point section.
And just also be clear that the payload cannot come apart. So if it has to be one object, it can't come in and break apart. And like glitter, like a glitter bomb or things like this would not be allowed. Next. Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the next activity that you can do with your team is about the story. So for this challenge, your team has to create a story about a remote place. So this activity asks your team members to go home and bring in some items about remote places, either maps, globes, travel brochures. These are things that they need to find on their own. And then they bring them in and you talk about them, what makes them a remote place, what kind of animals would be in this place, etc. And then you do basically a little instant challenge with your team.
Also key to that remote is very subjective. So remote doesn't necessarily mean far away in terms of distance. There can be a lot of definitions of remote. So it's also up to the team to determine what remote means to them.
And using those remote places that team members brought in, you do a little instant challenge with them about making a story in a remote place using these note cards listed here in the workbook, and making sure to go over your team what elements are needed in a story, beginning, middle, and end, what makes a good story, etc. And do this several times using different remote places, different things for your team to practice.
And the idea here is to get them to think about different ideas for their stories very quickly. So pick a remote place, randomly pick whether it's past, present, or future, and then randomly pick whether the story is going to be about the people, animal, or plants, or anything else you want about it. But make it so that then they can then give them 5 minutes to create a story about it, and then have them do the story, and then have them pick another thing and another combination of cards. And the idea is here that you can go through maybe 4 or 5 different ideas very quickly so that they can understand how to think about the stories and maybe what type of stories, portions of the stories they may want to emphasize or not.
But this is just for idea generation, correct?
This is all for idea generation. Exactly. So a good way to do it is just to have them do it really quickly with these, and then they can find out which ideas sort of work and which ones don't, and whether they like and whether they don't like, and whether they want to do. Next up is activity number 3, and activity number 3 is to help your team understand the scoring. So one of the challenges here is for the kids to understand how many points they're going to get for where the landing of the aircraft, and also the points for the payload. So we have these worksheets that you can actually print out and show to your teams, and then ask them to score it. So like the first scenario here, the first scoring problem number 1, you can see here that this is the presentation area, and the A, B, C, D, and E here, these circles here are where the payload landed, and then over here is where the aircraft landed for each one of those. And so in this case here, the number of payload drop scores is going to be 5 times 10 because they're all within the 10 zone. And then all the aircraft landed past the landing zone line. And so that would give them, each time they landed successfully, it's 2 points. So this is for landing, that's going to be 10 points. So the total points for this is 60 points. And this is a scenario of the maximum number of points for the payload and the landing that they can receive. The scoring problem number 2 is where the payloads were outside the zones, and that the aircrafts are landed inside here. And this is an example of actually getting 0 points. It would actually have 0 points in this case. And so we have a couple other examples here. And the idea is to work with your teams so that they can understand the scoring of how the aircraft is being stored and drops are being scored.
We have another question, so it's going to be read to us.
This question is about whether or not the aircraft has to fit within the lettered squares.
Yes. Yes, it does. So both the aircraft and the payload have to fit within the each of the, what are those called? Takeoff zones. Mm-hmm. And that can be found. Give me a second to find it, and then I will get back to you.
But also, the launch equipment with used to launch it does not have to be completely within those launch areas. So you can have your launch equipment extending far outside of it. The only requirement is that the aircraft needs to become completely airborne within the launch area.
So the section where the answer to that question is, if you have your little green booklet, it's going to be under payload drops. It's mirrored, so it's backwards. Haha. It's under payload drops, and then it's going to be number 5. And number 5 reads, for each payload drop, all parts of the aircraft and payload must fit into and become airborne from entirely within the chosen takeoff zone. So your entire aircraft and payload have to fit entirely within A or B or C or D or E. And we have another question.
This one's long, so I have to read it. Does the aircraft have to land in the 2 by 20 foot area, or will it receive points if it crosses the line and is outside of the landing zone?
Great question. It's just that it has to be past the line. So that line is really just an infinite line. It just has to be on the other side of the
So
line.
as long as it passes this landing line right here, oh my gosh, this mouse. As long as it passes this landing line, you're good to go. The reason they put this 2 feet here is because that's what we're required to give you. So there is a chance that at your tournament, we may only have a 20 by 20 foot space. And in that instance, we would only have 2 feet allotted. That said, most of the time we're in a gym, so be sure to talk with your regional challenge master to make sure that you've got space if your aircraft goes beyond that 2 feet. Okay. Anything else? Questions? Are we good? Okay.
Next up is things that move.
Which is me. Okay, so for this next activity, we're really just trying to get teams comfortable with the way things move. There are a lot of motors and things with wheels around your house, and we want the teams to be able to think about things that move as more than just creating a computer code and making a robot do its thing. There are lots of ways that we can make things move, and so this activity is just to help familiarize students with that. So this activity is centered around gathering a bunch of motors and wheeled objects from around your house, and then building an instant challenge to help your students interact with those different parts. Just interact with different things and find ways to move stuff. So if you look on the second page, it says this is an example of an instant challenge. So for example, you might have a leaf blower in your garage, and you could give your students a leaf blower and some rope, a skateboard, duct tape, paper plate, and say, okay, make something move, build something that can move this. And they're just going to get used to using those different materials to make things move.
One of the great things about instant challenges is that this is where you can teach them about these. You can teach them about how a drill motor works. You can teach them about how, about leaf blowers and so forth. One big thing to be aware about with this challenge is you cannot say, use this or use this in your central challenge. It's really up to the team members to make that connection. So be very, very careful. So you're teaching them about, this is a way to teach them about simple things that are around the house that are simple motors. But you got to be very careful that you don't have them say, use this in the sample. They must be doing their interpretation and creating that connection.
Instant challenges are a great way to teach your teams about things that they just don't have experience with. But again, make sure that you're not crossing that line and saying, okay, so how can you use this in your central challenge? Because you can't say that.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any questions on that one, Justin? No? Okay. We're going to keep cruising. Then our next piece is integration, and that's Justin.
So integration is my absolute favorite thing to talk about in DI because it is all about the big picture idea of your presentation. So with integration, the key to it is when we're scoring an item for integration, we can't score that in a vacuum. Integration is scored based on how that item relates to the rest of the performance. It's like when you're baking a cake, well, I'm skipping ahead to my favorite metaphor. So anyways, so with integration, we've developed this rubric of some questions that your team can ask themselves to determine whether or not an item is well integrated or not. And these questions all center around this rubric centers around these two questions of what is lost if we remove this element, and what would be lost if we change this element into something else. And so by asking ourselves these questions, we can get at whether or not this element is significant to our presentation. And if it's really significant and you lose a lot when you remove it, then that element is well integrated. It's like baking a cake. You know that all the elements in a cake are well integrated because if I take out any one element, the eggs, the flour, the vanilla, whatever I remove, I no longer have a cake because the ingredients just don't mix together. And that's what a well-integrated solution, a well-integrated item in a solution should feel like, is if I take this out, the solution is no longer the same. And again, the critical thing about this rubric is that the kids have to be asking and answering these questions themselves. Because if the team manager or somebody else goes out and answers these questions, that is interpreting the challenge for the team.
What you can do also with this challenge is that while they're practicing their story, and they can go through the story and they're practicing with their props and so forth, is just have them take some of the elements away, just remove it, and have them do a practice without that, and then ask them whether it changed the story and then had a substantive change to the story. And that's a good way for them to understand what integration is. So because if it's removed and literally there was no change to the story, then that element, they will learn that it's not integrated. If it's something that they remove from it and it's something that is just completely central to what they're doing, they would start learning that what integration is. And so you can pick elements of their story and elements of their team choice elements and just literally just have them do the practice without it and then see how that feels to them. And that's a good way to teach integration.
Okay, we have no questions on that.
Sweet. Okay, so workmanship.
Workmanship. Yep.
Okay, workmanship. Wonderful. So our next activity is designed around workmanship. And you're going to see that wording when we're talking about team choice elements. So one of the things team choice elements are scored for is workmanship, and that's about the quality of what they're producing. It's the effort that they put in to an item. This is also helpful because workmanship is really similar to technical design. So you would be able to use this activity to assess technical design also. Okay, so this activity is another rubric where teams can look at one element within their solution and determine its workmanship. So the first question is, how long would it take us to rebuild this element? If it's something that they've been spending a lot of time on and they've done it really well, answering this question, they're probably not going to say it's going to take me 5 minutes to rebuild it. If they do say it takes them 5 minutes, then there's probably some space for them to increase that workmanship. Anything to add?
Yeah, what I would add on this is that throughout your team practices, your kids and they will create a lot of different things throughout their time, and don't throw them away. So use them to help teach workmanship. And so if they create something and it turns into a ball of duct tape, literally keep that ball of duct tape and don't throw it away. I know you're going to be tempted to throw it away, but keep it. And then when they create something that actually took a lot of time and effort, also keep those things. And then this is the way that you can actually have them compare the things that they've created, and then they'll understand more and more about the workmanship associated with it. So it's like, keep those things around, just like we did on the technical design and innovation. Create that 0 to 30 scale, and you can create those things. And when they create something, have them put it on that 0 to 30 scale, and keep it around. And so when they create something new, just ask them, where does it fit on the scale? Does this fit? Is this compared to your ball of duct tape, or is this compared to the thing that you took your backdrop that might have taken 2 months to paint? So that's a good way to sort of work through what workmanship means.
And that's the end of our workbook. I think that's all we have.
Yeah.
Any questions? Yeah, any questions about the challenge?
Oh, talk about our communication.
Oh, yes. So one of the other things that I want you all to be aware of is that we, as an ACM team, try to have really solid and consistent communication with everyone. So if you registered as a technical team manager, when you registered through the DI Colorado website, you should have gotten some emails from us that welcomed you to the challenge season. But we also sent out an email about trainings, and then today we sent out an email reminding you about the webinar. So if you're not getting those emails, or you would like to be getting those emails, I need you to email me so we can put you on that list. And you can just type your email into the question box, and then I can get it from there. And we can add you to our email list if you're not already on it.
And the ECM team here is a resource for you, and we're here to make you successful. So if you have any questions, concerns, or anything, please always feel free to reach out to us and send us emails.
We're around.
And we're around. We'll get that information back to you.
Did we get any questions?
Yes, we've got a couple.
We got a couple questions.
Question 1, can the team use pre-made planes and still get full points? How would they do that? Do they need to modify/embellish the purchased plane?
So if it's a purchased solution, the things that they're going to get scored on are going to be on the things that they modified. So so it's more than just saying that they put paint on it. It's going to be that they put a lot of other technical work into it, is really what it is. So to say that they can't get I would not say that they can't get it by putting embellishments on it, but they're going to have to do some pretty serious innovations and technical innovations on that. So it's more than just decorations. It's actually doing all the technical work also. A good example of this, I mean, there could be differences with an aircraft that they just purchased as a toy and ones that they actually built completely from scratch. You're going to get a very vast difference in scores between those two.
Yes. I just want to draw attention to this part, right? Oh, of course. Okay, we'll just put it right there. This section. So teams may incorporate commercially produced items, but just like David was just saying, for scoring, we're only going to consider the additions to those items. And in order to get those full points, yeah, it's going to have to be some serious additions.
Right. So modifications is not just changing it or putting something around it.
Our next question is, can you build a backup aircraft with the same design in case your aircraft breaks in competition?
So great question. So the rules are that you can only have a single aircraft.
You can only have a single aircraft on site during the presentation. However, you can have a second aircraft that you have built and just stays off stage with a parent or whatever and does not come on stage just in case the one that you planned on using breaks.
So if you built 2 aircraft and your intention was you've practiced and you know that after 2 attempts it breaks and so you want to bring this other one on, that won't count. But what you can do is you can have the single aircraft, and then should that one break before you go on that day, you can use the other aircraft. I hope that makes sense.
And this gets actually at the technical design portion. Technical design is virtually about reliability.
Mm-hmm.
And so if your aircraft cannot go for 5 launches and 5 landings, then there's some issues with technical design. And so you need to make sure that part of the technical design is going to be that it can be reliably launched and landed 5 times.
Okay. We have another question that is, where are the parameters for the payloads? There's a whole section on payloads, but if you have some more specifics as to what you mean by parameters, we would love it if you asked another question.
Yeah. So like the payload can be any size, so long as it fits in that A, B, C, or D. It can't be 2 parts or a part like designed to break apart. And that's not in this challenge. It's actually a published clarification that you can find online. That it can't be, it has to be one single item. I know we covered that earlier. Do we have more clarity around that?
The more clarity is, where is the section on payloads? Section B.
Page 4.
That is all the information on the payloads.
Well, 4 through 5. But there's quite, it's pretty dense. And that's going to be in the challenge booklet. Like this. I know it's backwards, but you get the idea. Other questions?
Yes. This question is, for example, if the payload was attached to the aircraft by a string, can the team go and cut the string to complete a payload drop?
That sounds like a really great clarification that you would ask to the International Challenge Masters. So with things that are very specific like that, it's all about how your team interprets the rules. So if your team feels like that might be a good solution, but they also kind of feel like it's sticky, that's something where you would ask the International Challenge Masters your specific question, and whatever their response is like legally binding for us. So if you come into tournament that day and say, well, the International Challenge Masters told us we could do it, then we know that that's totally okay. But what we say doesn't change the rules that are in the book.
And just let you know, we have access to all the clarifications that put in. We know prior to, but we also know prior to what people are asking and what's coming.
How do you do a clarification, Kayla?
Oh, what a fabulous question, Kate.
I thought so.
Let me pull it up online and then we'll talk about it. Clarifications. It's probably not going to come up with it.
I was shocked. That was it.
Yes.
Okay.
Page.
So let's share my screen. Oh, wait, no, wait, I don't want to do that. Okay, can you all see this new page, destinationimagination.org, /challenge programs, /clarifications?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the clarification page. I literally Googled Destination Imagination clarifications, and this was the first one that came up. And so down here, you have the different challenges that you can click on. So published clarifications are clarifications that a bunch of people asked the same question, and the International Challenge Masters said, oh my gosh, this is a problem. We need to make sure this is clear for everyone. A private clarification or a team clarification is something where you ask your specific piece, like, can my team cut a string that's very specific to what your team plans to do. And they won't publish that. They will just send you the response. So here you have the different challenges. We'll click on target. And you can see that we have one published clarification that's listed right here. And you can read through that, but again, that's the thing that says the payload can't break apart. And then if you wanted to ask a clarification for your team, you can just click here. The clarification deadline is February 15th. You would log in and it would let you. But the clarification deadline is February 15th, and you can ask 10 clarifications. Don't be afraid to use those. Most people don't end up asking all 10. So feel comfortable asking clarifications when you have those questions come up.
And be very careful when you get the responses back, because what the challenge masters will typically do will point you back to the rules. But you got to be very careful that when you get them back, what they actually mean. And so just the clarifications take a lot of thinking about how to interpret them. And it's also, just be clear, these are clarifications that your team puts together. It's not the team manager puts them together. These are the ones that your team are having problems about. And so the team should be the people putting and writing the clarifications.
You're an elementary team manager, you can help with that.
Yeah.
But it should still be the intent of the kids.
Exactly. It should be them being very much involved with the process.
We have another question online. It reads, this is a big area. Will appraisers be 25 feet away? I know you talked about areas to practice in, and that helped. I'm thinking ahead about whether my team should work more on projecting their voices or having their gestures and movements be visible.
So the guidance we give to our appraisers is the appraisers will move wherever the kids are and wherever they need to be to hear it. So obviously projecting the voice is a good thing and a nice thing for presentations, but don't do it for the appraisers. You want to, the appraisers will always move to the location. They're moving around and they're trying to be as close to the presentation so that they can get the best view of what the performance is.
That said, there are some requirements, like your payload drop must be able to be seen from 25 feet away. So make sure that you're not dropping a speck of dust, because it makes it hard for the appraisers to see that.
And also, back with voices and projecting, there is a limit to how close our appraisers can get, because there's a point where it becomes awkward when we are standing in this presentation. So projection is always helpful because it makes our jobs easier. We will do our best to hear them, but sometimes we just can't.
Anything else?
Another question. Will props be allowed inside the payload drop area?
So props can be anywhere on the performance. They can be anywhere you want. They can be in the payload drop area. They can be in the landing lines. They can be in the takeoff. They could be even behind the launch line. There is no there's no requirement of where our exclusion area. Now, with that said, you cannot have your aircraft and your payloads hitting any other objects. So you want to make sure that if you put something in that area, that it's not going to be interfering with the payload dropping or touching it in any way. And so that would be that's the guidance with that.
Okay. Another question. Can there be any item like a magnet placed in the payload drop zone in advance to the payload drop flights?
Very clever, but no, there can be nothing guiding the payload once it's been dropped from that plane other than the payload itself and gravity.
And then another question, can you clarify the landing area? Is it only the 2 feet past the landing line?
It can be, it's the landing line is just the designation of when the aircraft has to land past it. It can be anything beyond it. And it really depends on the performance area. In most places, it's going to be larger, but it's so it's not just going to be 2 feet and there's a big wall there. That's not the way it's going to typically happen. But it may happen. So you really need to work with your local RCMs to find out what the site's going to be like.
RCM is your regional challenge master, so ask your regional director for that information.
Yeah.
Yes. So we have some clarification on the payload question that was asked. So it looks like it's found under the payload section of the challenge, and then it's going to be number 8, where it says the payload may not come into contact with or be directed by anything other than the tournament provided floor until it stops moving. So making sure that those props don't interfere with that, and making sure that magnets that are placed on the floor, that would be interfering with its movement, other than the tournament provided floor. Yeah?
They really just want it to be dropped, basically. The intent was for it to drop. Yeah. Any other questions?
We don't have any online, but let's give it another minute for people to marinate and make sure
That this is clear. And again, if you want to get on those emails and you aren't, I'm happy to put you on them. Just send me your email.
Yeah, if you just type in the chat, we've already had one person asked to make sure. We've already had one person ask to make sure that we had them on the list. So if you type in the chat, we'll get it on the list and try to make sure you are how you're supposed to be, if you're unsure.
While you guys are thinking about your questions, something else that is important for you to practice with your team is what to do when they fail. So making sure you practice that ahead of time. So practice with them. What would they do if they showed up to the tournament and everything fell apart? Or what would they do if they showed up and they forgot their aircraft at home? So practice that ahead of time so that if those situations do arise on tournament day, they're prepared and they know how to handle it, and they don't just freak out about it. So
it looks like we got a couple more questions, and Kate, you might be helpful for these.
Oh, okay.
One of them is this webinar going to be available for review online?
Yes, it will be on our Team Manager webinar page and on our YouTube, our DI Colorado YouTube channel.
And again, if you're on our emails, I will send that link out.
It's right under, it's right where you registered, got the link to register for this webinar. That it's on, it will be right where the link was.
Second thing, is there other webinar material available for new team managers?
I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Is there other teaching materials available?
So,
actually, I'm going to jump in on that question a little bit, because there's this really incredible resource out there. When you registered for a team number, you should have gotten an email from Adobe Captivate that invited you for some trainings. And it's actually a really neat program. I've done a bunch of them on like being a new team manager, and I've gone through the technical challenge one. It's a really incredible resource that lets you get online and really explore the different parts of the challenge.
Kayla, can you switch your computer to the Destination Imagination homepage?
Yeah, I might be able to give you control of my mouse if you want it to.
No, I mean I can take control. It's just I don't want to. So just go to the Destination Imagination
Colorado page or Destination Imagination?
DestinationImagination.org.
Great. Okay.
And you're still showing your Adobe, your PDF.
Oh, just kidding. Sorry, team. Okay, here we go.
Okay, click on login. Top right. Login.
Login.
If you guys have not been, and then click Teams, and then Affiliate Teams, and then click on Modify for Abraham Lincoln. If you guys have not seen this page for your team, you are not getting the Adobe Captivate online training links. You have to go in here and put your name in the team manager box. And if you have any questions or how to do that, you can email me at kate@dicolorado.org. If you have not seen this page, you need to commit to this step in order to get invited to the Adobe Captivate training. It's also where we grab a lot of information from this page. So please make sure that your name is in the team manager field.
Okay. Anything else?
That looks like it.
Okay. Wonderful. We had a really great turnout tonight. And I think that's awesome. I'm really happy that you all came.
Yeah. Have a great time, and we'll, again, if you have, like you said, if you have any questions, feel free always to reach out to us. We're here to help.
Okay. Wonderful. All right. Thanks so much.
All right, guys. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Justin, did you get all the emails off the chat? I also can do a report to pull them.
I only saw 2. Is that how many you saw?
That's all I saw too.
Cool. Yeah, I wrote this down.
You guys
Don't die. Okay. Are we good to go?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Almost? Okay.
Good.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
I'll see you in a bit.